Guys, and welcome back to our little book club. As always, I'm your host, Piper.
And I'm your co-host, Melanie. This week we read The Hungry Tide by Amative Josh Piper. We talked a little before getting on the mic. You said you had some problems with the ending?
Yeah, I did, but before we get into that, we'll give some context for the listeners. So, in The Hungry Tide, our two main characters are Pia, a Seattle-raised cetologist, that's dolphin researchers for the uninformed, who's on her way to the Sundarbans to look for dolphins. While traveling, she meets Kanai, a linguistic translator. They strike up a conversation, and Kanai invites her to Lusabari, where he's going to visit his aunt in the wake of his uncle's death. In Kanai's point of view, he learns about the history of Lusabari and the region through his aunt and through his uncle's journals that he left to Kanai. In Pia's perspective, she sets off in search of the dolphins. In the process, she winds up falling into the river and is rescued by Fokir, a fisherman, and his child. Despite her not speaking the local language and Fokir not speaking English, they form a friendship and he agrees to take her to Lusabari. Along the way, they look for dolphins. After Fokir and Pia make it to Lusabari, Pia meets back up with Kanai. Afterwards, Fokir, Kanai, Horan, and Pia all go back out in the Horan's boat, the Mega, to see the dolphins. In order to enter the more narrow and shallow rivers, Fokir and Pia head out in Fokir's boat, leaving Kanai and Horan behind on the Mega. They notice they're acting weird and find a baby dolphin corpse. Through this, they notice an incoming cyclone, and Pia and Fokir tie themselves to a tree, and Fokir ends up getting bludgeoned to death in the storm, which I thought was way too sad. Like, why did all that even happen?
I knew you would hate that, which is why I arranged for a surprise guest. Cutter, is a chronic mansplainer. So, Cutter, can you explain why the book ended the way it did, please?
Of course. So throughout the novel, there is a recurring theme of humanity and nature being at odds with each other. And in the novel, humanity is dangerous to wildlife, having caused climate crisis, and people to the area having to be on guard, constantly looking for tigers or the extreme weather changes. The dolphin in this book is a sort of martyr because they act as the messenger for Bon Bibbidi. Because the dolphin calf gets hurt, one of the human characters has to die for there to be balance.
Okay, what do you mean messenger? Isn't it just a fish? Can we get like a dolphin expert in here?
Well, first off, not a fish. Second of all, hi, I'm Camille, a dolphin mythology expert. The significance of the dolphins to the myth of the tides is vital to understanding both the original and alternate ending. In Nirmal's journal, he tells the story of the Greek goddess who was the twin rivers Indus and Ganges' mother. The rivers were once connected, he says, and we can tell this because of the river dolphins, whom the twin rivers nurtured and made their own, and can only be found within their waters. This parallels the myth of Bon Bibi, which begins when she and Shanjanjali have twins and are given the divine mission of making the tides fit for human habitation. In the original myth, Bon Bibi agrees to give half the Thai country to Dokkan Rai, and it isn't until one person acts out in extreme greed, showing a willingness to let the boy Duki die in exchange for wealth, that Bon Bibi would show the world the law of the forest, which was that the rich and greedy would be punished while the poor and righteous were rewarded.
Okay, wait, you lost me. What does the rich and greedy have to do with Fokir dying in the tree?
This is important for the shift in the ending. The dolphin calf, killed by a propeller of a boat that would likely belong to the Coast Guard, police, or other officials, people who have been shown throughout the novel multiple times to accept bribes and act in greed, represent that imbalance in the original Bon Bibi myth between man and nature. Nirmal does continue the Greek myth, stating that the river goddess Ganga dazzles a king who gives her permission to do whatever she wants, including, if she chose, even to drown her own children, and thus was launched a Parva of the Mahabharata that Kanai later translates for Pia. Parva, in this case, meaning an epic, like Homer's The Iliad. The original ending requires this addition to the Greek myth to make Fakir's death meaningful. Without it, we question why Bon Bibi didn't save one of her loyal followers. The river is in his veins, and yet she kills him.
Okay, so was the death of the baby dolphin like a message then from Bon Bibi telling Fokir it was his time to go?
He does express that he will be joining his mother soon, so it would make sense for him to understand this as an omen. The dolphins, or the messengers of Bon Bibi, unharmed would have been able to warn the poor and righteous of the incoming storm without an omen of death. Fokir would have been protected as a child of the river himself, and in turn would have lived.
Okay, well, I'm vegan and a Pisces, and I don't want the dolphin or Fokir to die. Why couldn't it have just ended with no one dying?
Aspiring writer here. My name is Justin. Let's just say the calf never dies. That means Volkir wouldn't die either.
Okay, you guys keep saying calf. I thought we were talking about fish.
Okay, so the baby dolphin never dies. As Pia suspects in the original ending, the calf is killed by the propeller of a boat that likely belongs to the Coast Guard or police. We see Volkir express confusion as they journey further away, having not come across any of the dolphins, and this will no longer be the case. The pod of dolphins hangs around the body long enough for it to have a strong stench that Pia has to cover her face. If the dolphins hadn't been stationary for the purpose of staying with the calf, then likely Volkir and Pia would have encountered the pod much sooner in their journey, causing them to have observed the odd behavior outside the calf's death earlier, allowing them to turn back to the mega.
And then Fokir doesn't have to tie them to the tree. I like that way better.
There are some consequences here, though. The first is that though Paya was forced to contend with her preconceived notions about the role of conservation and human rights during the village tiger attack, she will no longer have the first-hand experience with the severity of nature and the tides. She tells Kenai that she would be more willing to die for her research and for her dolphins, but instead has to process that somebody else died instead. It is also through this process of mourning for Fokir that she and Mona and Nilma get to know each other and bond in a way that provides the foundation for the trust to sponsor her research. The second point is that Nilma is shown to be unwilling to risk her foundation for that which she thinks is unstable or could put it in jeopardy, and it is through building trust in Paya and seeing herself in the situation that she is willing to sponsor the research. What I mean by this is that Nilma still struggles with Kenai's inheritance of the notebook because she receives nothing from Nirmal, her late husband, and yet it provides a glimpse back at him and what he was thinking prior to his death. After viewing the data on Paya's GPS, she is able to see how Paya's work is important and in a way connected to the life of Fokir, much like how the notebook preserves the life of Nirmal. By sponsoring her research, she will be preserving Fokir. Instead, if they made it back to the Mega, all of Paya's research would have been preserved anyway, which also would have meant that Fokir would have lived, and instead of building research off of the knowledge and foundation of Fokir's understanding of nature, she would have been able to begin with her observations and numbers.
The book explores the intertwined themes of man versus nature and nature versus conservation. In the original conclusion, Fokir's sacrifice is deemed necessary due to human harm inflicted on nature. However, if the balance is preserved by safeguarding the calf, Fokir's life is spared. The fate of Fokir depends on the well-being of the calf because the story symbolizes the interconnectedness between man and nature. If the calf is unharmed, the natural balance is maintained. It would highlight the concept that when humans coexist harmoniously with nature, they can thrive together. This alternate ending symbolizes a harmless coexistence between humanity and the natural world, fostering reconnection that allows both to thrive together in harmony.
Right, just like the significance of Bombibi, a deity worshipped by the forest-dwelling communities of the Sundarbans in India and Bangladesh. She is believed to protect the inhabitants of the forest from natural calamities and wild animals. Considering how dolphins are considered sacred messengers of Bombibi, as they are believed to guide her followers, warning them of dangers and helping them navigate safely, symbolizing protection, guidance, and connection between humans and the divine.
So to recap for our listeners, in this version of the book, there's no dead baby dolphin corpses, Fokir lives, and okay, let's face it, folks, if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Him and his wife are definitely getting divorced, and she's getting full custody. But Pia doesn't lose all of her notes, so she can save all of the dolphins or whatever. I don't know why he couldn't have written it like that in the first place. Books are just way too complicated, guys. Well, that's all we have for this week. Join us next week when we tackle the Bone People.